God, we ask that you would fill us today. Speak to us, empower us, teach us how to be your people in the world. Amen. Grab yourselves a seat. So interesting, I think, actually, for the passage today, having had, my trio of bad things happen this week, actually Jesus talks about, although it's not about flooding toilets, it's a bit more spiritual than that, but Jesus does talk about bad things happening to his followers and how to respond. So I'm going to read to you from Luke chapter 21. And some of Jesus' disciples began talking about the majestic stonework of the temple and the memorial decorations on the walls. But Jesus said, "The time is coming when all these things will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of the other." "Teacher," they asked, "when will this happen? What sign will show us that these things are about to take place?" He replied, "Don't let anyone mislead you. For many will come in my name claiming I am the Messiah and saying the time has come. But don't believe them. And when you hear of wars and insurrections, don't panic. Yes, these things must take place first, but the end won't follow immediately." Then he added, "Nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, and there will be famines and plagues in many lands, and there will be terrifying things and great miraculous signs from heaven. But before all this occurs, there will be a time of great persecution. You'll be dragged into synagogues and prisons, and you'll stand trial before kings and governors because you are my followers. But this will be your opportunity to tell them about me. So don't worry in advance about how to answer the charges against you, for I will give you the right words and such wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to reply or refute you. Even those closest to you, your parents, brothers, relatives, and friends will betray you. They will even kill some of you, and everyone will hate you because you are my follower. But not a hair on your head will perish. By standing firm, you will win your souls." Cheery reading. If you're a follower of Jesus, don't panic and everyone will hate you. I want to sort of explore what this passage is saying today and take it in the chunks, talking about the temple and then some of these other points Jesus is making and what can we learn from that today. So it starts off, here are Jesus' disciples and they're wandering through the temple, which was this huge structure. And if you go back and put yourself in their position, they would have all grown up and lived in very small houses, one, maybe two small rooms for their entire family to exist in, to cook, to sleep, to eat, these tiny houses. And then in Jerusalem, the capital city, there's this huge structure, which is a temple which has been built to worship God. Now, thankfully for me, and my deep dive going down the rabbit hole of looking at the temple, there's a lot of people who are quite obsessed with the temple have made animated fly-throughs. So we get a couple today to get a sense of what it looks like. So if this is going to work, here we go. So here is the temple in Jerusalem that they are admiring. And you can see just in there, there's all the little people. So it's this huge structure. And as you approached it, you came from the outside of the city and you would go up these grand stairs. And then fires would be lit for the sacrifices and it would glow on the gold on the temple. So quite incredible compared with the very basic existence you live now. Really interesting, if you've ever been into a grand cathedral in Europe that's several hundred years old, you'll see it's ornate and grand, and it was to be this contrast to the everyday, because everyday life was bland and kind of everyone's clothes were the same colour as the walls of their house, as the dirt they tilled in the farm. It's interesting, now when you create or build a spiritual space, people make them very plain and simple because our everyday lives are so cluttered and full of colour that people need to mark, this is a different sacred space. So back then, it was all about kind of the grandeur and the gilt of the gold. And now this one may need some help from the back. Do Do you reckon Steffi could swing in? Dan managed to get it working this morning by doing some... Oh, here we go. It just takes a while. So you see the wee doors there to get a little bit of a context of how big this structure is back in the day. We'll just do our last swing around. So there we go. There's a little bit of a sense of this temple. So we've got the disciples and they're there. They're in Jerusalem and they're looking at the temples and they make the comment to Jesus, this is amazing. And it would have been for them this incredible structure. And Jesus is like, I tell you the truth, one day it's going to be demolished. I don't know if you've ever had that sense of being in an overwhelming space. Years ago, I was in Florence in Italy and I had hopped off the train. I had this really heavy backpack on and I had a map trying to figure out where I was staying, and I was stumbling through these little medieval, very narrow streets, and it's quite hard to navigate. And I was on my own and it started raining and I was miserable and I was asking people, do you know where this is? And everyone's like, nope. So I'm stumbling alone and it's dusk down these little streets, and I'm just looking at my map and looking to try and see if there's street names on the side of these buildings and these tiny streets. And I hadn't looked up for a while, and I was walking down a street, and suddenly I looked up, and there is the most stunning cathedral ever, and it completely filled all my view. And it's the Duomo in Florence. It's just this huge structure, and I just had all these feelings of excitement and fear and awe at just the size of the structure compared to all these little medieval buildings around it. And that feeling, I often think, that's what they would have felt like back in Jesus' day, going to Jerusalem from their tiny little villages, heading there in this huge structure that just powers over everything else, sort of a monument to, what could be achieved. Here it is, supposedly to give glory to God, maybe more glory to the engineers and the architects and the person who funded it. There's been one other time in my life where I've felt this feeling. I had a friend who was an engineer for Air New Zealand, and we went to the hangar, and I think this is the Christchurch hangar back in the 70s. It was the only picture I could find of it online. But has anyone been in a hangar? Like the big hangars, they're huge. And he said that sometimes they'd have their own weather systems in them. Clouds would form and it would start raining inside this hangar. But here's this sense of awe at this gigantic structure and a kind of human achievement, like, look at this building and the openings to get the planes in and out. How does this even stand up? And so here are the disciples, and they've got this very human reaction. Look at this. This is incredible. And Jesus is like, it's going to come down. It's going to be pulled down. It had just been finished. Here's a comment on this. Jesus continues to provoke the animosity of religious leaders in the seat of their power, Jerusalem. He promises that God's supposed home, the temple adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, will be destroyed. For the days will come when not one stone will be left upon another, and all will be thrown down. He says with words what he has been saying with his actions during his whole ministry. God's home is not among jewels and gifts, but in the love of our hearts and in the generosity of our actions. So here is this prediction, and here is Jesus kind of like very nonchalant about this human structure. This isn't what is important. Don't put your trust in a building. Don't put your trust in things that humans have made, whether structures or organisations. This is invitation to put your trust in Jesus. And it wasn't long after that the temple was, Jerusalem was attacked and the temple was destroyed. And people were absolutely in shock. How could this happen? But this is exactly what Jesus had predicted. So there's the first part with the message. Don't trust these things that awe you and surprise you and excite you. It's an invitation to trust in God. And then Jesus moves into these disturbing comments about persecution and this prediction. Here's the Christian life. Look forward to it, folks. Come follow me for a life of grim sadness and pain and persecution. And I think the interesting thing is this contrast you get with this picture Jesus paints, this prophetic picture. The temple's going to be destroyed, and here's what's going to happen to you. This other prophet in the Bible, in the Old Testament, Isaiah, and he predicts there will come a time when God's promised Messiah will come to earth, and earth will be transformed. And here's the words in stark contrast from Isaiah. Look, I'm creating new heavens and a new earth, and no one will even think about the old ones anymore. Be glad, rejoice forever in my creation, and look, I will create Jerusalem as a place of happiness. Her people will be a source of joy. I will rejoice over Jerusalem and delight in my people, and the sound of weeping and crying will be heard in it no more. No longer will babies die when only a few days old. No longer will adults die before they have lived a full life. No longer will people be considered old at 100. Only the cursed will die that young. In those days, people will live in the houses they build and eat the fruit of their own vineyards. Unlike the past, invaders will not take their houses and confiscate their vineyards. For my people will live as long as trees, and my chosen ones will have time to enjoy their hard-won gains. They will not work in vain, and their children will not be doomed to misfortune. For they are a people blessed by the Lord, and their children too will be blessed. I will answer them before they even call to me. While they are still talking about their needs, I will go ahead and answer their prayers. The wolf and the lamb will feed together. The lion will eat hay like a cow, but the snakes will eat dust. In those days, no one will be hurt or destroyed on my holy mountain. I, the Lord, have spoken. How do you reconcile these two pictures from these two prophetic statements? Jesus predicting a life of hardship and pain, and Isaiah predicting a life where you're going to live as long as a tree, thousands of years potentially. And why is there this conflict? It's again a comment from a theologian. The contrast of Jesus' words with Isaiah's are striking. The Saviour will bring peace between the lion and lamb, while the gospel is certain to bring persecution and hardship. I know which life I'd rather live, but I also know which one is more realistic. But how do we marry the two? I've got 3 points that I want to make about this tension. The first is the Christian life will bring you into conflict with the world, including with rulers, and this will make your life hard sometimes. And secondly, there's a gap between the now and the what is to come, and that is where the discipline of hope is needed. And finally, what Jesus calls for his followers to do is sometimes counterintuitive. So I want to dip into each of those points and kind of figure out, how do we live in this weird situation where we face hardship, yet there is this promise that one day there will be joy and there will no longer be sadness. Our prayers will be heard and answered. How do we live in this in-between stage? So the first point, the Christian life will bring you into conflict with the world, including with rulers, and this will make your life hard sometimes. This is really what Jesus is talking about. You're going to be persecuted because of what you believe. This reminds me of a man I knew, Mike Riddell. I'd met him a couple of times, and he was a Baptist pastor. He died unexpectedly recently, and this was one of the comments in his obituary. Mike Riddell established the Community of Refuge Trust, a community housing organisation still in existence 34 years later and providing housing for over 500 people. Mike famously stripped to his boxer shorts at a council meeting in an attempt to stall the sale of council housing. When Mike talked about this, he said he didn't go in planning to do this. He went to a council meeting to stand and speak on behalf of the poor that were being ignored and overlooked in the decisions of the council where they were going to sell off the council housing. And he was like, this is people's lives and their communities and their homes. You cannot sell them. And as he's impassioned, begging the council not to sell the houses, he says, you are stripping the rights of the poor. And he starts whipping his clothes off. And I don't know if this is the answer to, Jesus will give you the words. Don't worry. Don't worry. Just trust God. You might be in a meeting and find yourself whipping off. It's interesting. It made the headlines and it became headline news. This is what the council wants to do, to sell off the poor. And here is a pastor who works with the poor speaking up on behalf of them. And this is one of the things Jesus is talking about. Sometimes life is hard because the values of Jesus' kingdom directly clash with the values of the world. Jesus' values are to care for the poor and the neglected and the outcast and those on the margins. And yet the world wants to make money, to get richer. And haven't we seen that in the news with the story of the banks over and over? The shareholders want their returns and yet people are losing their homes. And here is the world, and what are we called to do? Sometimes we speak up against it, and because of that, we face persecution. And then there's this thought, there's a gap between the now and what is to come. And this is where people like Mike Riddell stepped into that gap to provide housing. God promises that one day people will have their own homes and their own vineyards, and he calls us into this kingdom to work for God's purposes in the world. Come and join what God is doing in the world. Don't sit back passively waiting. One day we're promised life will go fine. We're called to be part of the journey, part of the expression of Jesus in the world. Come and join so that we can bring hope and healing to others. But until that final day when Jesus returns, our world will not be perfect. And so we struggle with suffering and disappointment. And that is the reality of our world. And we have to learn, how do we trust God in the midst of this situation? And that is the journey of learning to trust, of surrendering it to Jesus and saying, I don't know what to do in this situation, this feels too hard. Come and be present. And to learn, to have that hope that one day things will be put right. But God is a good God in the meantime, that we can still trust in the midst of disappointment. And the final point is that what Jesus calls for his followers to do is sometimes counterintuitive. We might think we understand. As a follower of Jesus, this is how I must respond in a certain circumstance. Luke 21, that story goes on, and Jesus gives advice to his followers. When you see the approaching armies, run, head for the hills. You might have heard that expression, head for the hills. This is kind of where it comes from, head for the hills. And there's this long tradition that says that's exactly what Jesus' followers did. They fled and they actually went north, and that's where the sort of centre of Christianity became for a while. They fled Jerusalem when they saw the armies approaching. There's been this debate just in more recent decades of people reading about this history and saying, surely the Christians wouldn't have fled. Surely they would have stayed and fought against an invading army. Surely that wouldn't have been the Christian response. And yet history and, the writings of the early church says this is what they did. They fled. And here's this counterintuitive response. What do you do in the face of injustice? We're called to fight against injustice, but what do you do when your hometown is being invaded? Do you take up arms and go to war? Or do you run? And I think this isn't a real situation for us now, but for many parts of the world it is. If you're in the Ukraine, what do you do? Do you run or do you stay and fight? And what is the correct Christian response here? There's a theologian called Ched Myers, which I think is Paul's favourite, yes. And he makes this comment. This is a little bit extra for experts. It's kind of like my mind wandered off here, but it's curious. It says Mark's Jesus, you could also say Luke's Jesus. The picture that Luke paints of Jesus insists that disciples must not be driven into war's Faustian bargain and must instead remain radically critical of both sides. He does this because it is his deepest conviction that all military solutions are by definition counter-revolutionary, serving in the long run only to strengthen the oppressive political systems they claim to be reordering. In other words, no one's right. The moment there's war, it can bring no good. No one is right in these situations. What will happen at the end of the war will still be injustice. No matter who wins, there will be a political power in place and injustice will still flourish. This is the nature of our world where sin still exists. And how do we respond in the middle of this? I don't know if any of you follow much of American politics. I'm fascinated at the moment by the rise of Christian nationalism in America. Does anyone know what I'm talking about when I talk about Christian nationalism in America? I see a few hands. This is where there is a group of probably extreme right who believe that America is kind of God's anointed country, and at the moment that Trump is God's anointed leader. And they're prepared to fight for that because they are fighting to bring in and usher in God's. That's kind of a very broad brush picture of it. But here is this, I think, challenge to this way of thinking. The solutions for God's kingdom do not come through government. It doesn't matter who's in power, there will be injustice. We are invited to do something in the here and now, to not try and fight for the institution we think will bring peace to earth. We are called in our own ways to try and bring justice wherever we are. And we are encouraged to not panic, to not worry, but to trust God. How should we respond? To listen to the leading of God. To learn this discipline. God has the answers. And I think that this goes deeper than just the political machinations of the world. Who's fighting who? Who's attacking who? That in our own lives, there are wars that go on in our heads, our minds and our souls. And we wonder, where is the right answer? And I think the words of Jesus to his disciples ring true here. Don't worry. I'll give you the right words and such wisdom. Always there's this invitation to relationship. I think there's temptation to think Christianity is just a religion of the book. We go to the book and we tick off, there's all the guidelines for living. Jesus asks us to enter into relationship. Don't worry. Don't pre-plan. Trust me. I'll give you the right words. I'll give you the wisdom you need. So whatever you face, foreign armies or just trauma of everyday life, don't worry and don't panic. I'm going to give you the words and the wisdom to face it. So as we come to the end of the service, I just want to give us a little bit of time. There's probably something going on in your life where it's difficult, it's challenging, it's confusing. And I want to give us the space to bring that to Jesus and say, what do I do? What is your wisdom in this situation? Not what does the book say I should do, but what do you, living God, here and now, say that I should do in this situation? Let's pray. God, we all face things that feel like giants and they feel too hard. But you promise never to leave us. And here, Jesus, you promise your followers to give wisdom and insight and the words to say. And so, Jesus, we bring whatever troubles us, whatever confuses us, whatever has hurt us, wherever we feel pain and sorrow, we bring them to you. Thank you that you journey with us. And now we pray, Jesus, come and speak to us in those darkest corners of our lives. Be present and give us deep wisdom. And so, God, now we recall to mind those things that trouble us. Jesus, I pray you'd help us to learn the discipline of coming to you in the midst of our troubles and trials, in the middle of our day, at night when we cannot sleep. Help us to know that you are there, you listen and you care. May we learn new patterns of being in the world as we learn to listen to your wisdom. Amen.